Welcome to Living Well's Peak Mind series, brought to you by Point 32 Health. We've now arrived at the fourth and final session, episode 4, which we are calling What's Next? Maintaining Momentum from the Peak Mind Practices. Now, my name is John Roberts. I'm the Operations Manager for Mindfulness-Based Learning at Point 32 Health. I'm thrilled to be joined once again by my colleague, Tara Healy, who is founder and director of Point 32 Health's mindfulness program, Mind the Moment. So this series is being inspired by the work of Dr. Amishi Jha. Now, Dr. Jha, as many of you probably know by now, her research has shown that one can develop a mind optimized for focus and attention, even in high demand, high stress periods, by doing 12-minute mindfulness-based exercises once per day, most days of the week. So now in this series, we have been talking about and also practicing some of the foundational mindfulness exercises, which Amishi describes in her book. And in this episode, we will be looking at 2 more exercises, the first being called River of Thought, and the second is referred to as a connection practice. Now, in those earlier practices, what we were primarily doing was working on narrowing our focus, either by closely concentrating on something like the breath, or by closely concentrating on something like body sensations. And this purposeful narrowing of focus helps us to steady and sharpen our attention. But in the River of Thought practice, on the other hand, we're going to be taking that steady, sharpened attention, and we're going to be allowing it to widen until we can comfortably observe everything that's entering and exiting our awareness. And now that's where the metaphor comes in. It's like you're sitting by the banks of a river, watching different things float by. And here in our mental river, the things floating by, they may include thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, attitudes, impulses, memories, imagined ideas about the future, even those random bits of mental miscellany which we all have rattling about in our brains. So in the River of Thought practice, what we're doing is we're taking note of the great variety of things which roll by on our mental river. But this is the important part. We are not stopping and examining those things that roll past on the mental river. We're not grabbing them or chasing after them. Just as you wouldn't try to pull everything out of an actual river, you're also not trying to pull everything out of the mental river as it floats by. And so why not? So let me offer a little background on that. As we go about our lives, our brains are constructing mental models, essentially placing our experiences into different boxes or frames, which then guide our thinking, our decision-making, and our actions. These models become a kind of shorthand for navigating the sorts of common occurrences which pop up again and again in our lives, so that our brains don't have to constantly reassess everything they're encountering as though they had never encountered those things before. Therefore, our brains are freed up to do the large number of things which we naturally demand of them. Now, mental models are crucial for so many of the things that we do every day. Like if you're driving your car and you see a red light coming towards you, you want your brain to have developed a very specific and easily executed model for what you're supposed to do in that situation. It wouldn't be any good if every time you approached a red light while you're driving, you had to pull out your driver's ed textbook and remind yourself what you're supposed to do in that situation. However, mental models also have this ability to trip us up. For example, we may have developed a mental model around a coworker or a family member or a type of person. We've put them in a box, and once they're in that box, they stay in that box, even if our brains receive new bits of information that can contradict the mental model that has been established. And so that can affect every interaction we have with that person or with people like them. Now, Amishi puts this really well in her book. She writes, if you go into a conversation with someone expecting the conversation to be contentious, that mental model you've constructed ensures that you selectively focus on the aspects of the interaction that reinforce the story you've created, and then dim down any bits of competing information that might have offered a better way forward. So what is the solution? Amishi, again, she writes, we need to be able to toggle, to go back and forth, to drop the story for a few minutes at least in order to create mental models that are the most accurate depictions of the situation that we find ourselves in. So this brings us back to the mental river. In meditation, when we practice noticing the great number of things which float by on our mental river, we're practicing noticing them and not picking them up. And when we're doing that, what we're preparing ourselves to do in real life is, notice the mental models that arise in our minds during everyday encounters. And these include patterns of thought, attitudes, expectations, even biases or prejudices. Furthermore, we're practicing not just going along with those patterns of thought, but instead observing them, kind of keeping them at arm's length with something like a journalist's objectivity, an objectivity which asks, is this mental model I'm putting forth, is it the correct mental model which I should be bringing to bear on this particular situation? This sort of objectivity, furthermore, allows space and time for new information to come into our field of awareness, information which may be crucial to getting a fuller, more complete picture of what's going on in the situation that we happen to find ourselves in. And the upshot, as reported from Amishi's lab, is that research participants who were able to objectively observe their mental models reported having fewer intrusive thoughts, better mood, sounder sleep, less loneliness, and greater well-being. As Amishi writes very evocatively, an observational stance is an elixir that allows you to do everything better, accomplish tasks, plan, strategize, lead, innovate, and connect. All right, so Tara, I'd love if you were to lead us in a river of thought practice, and I'd love to have you sort of contextualize as well, like why you think this practice is important, maybe how it fits in with the connection practice, anything you like.
Yeah, no, definitely. The river of thought is a really interesting way to practice, and sometimes it's considered a more advanced practice, but I actually don't think that it has to be at all. And the idea with this is that with every time I practice, I always combine a few different practices. So, and that's what I'm going to do here. So we're going to kind of start by just settling in the body. I will have us start with flashlight. So I'll guide this so that we'll just allow ourselves to really arrive, to get as settled as we can get in this moment. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to release the flashlight and then just open up the field of awareness. And we're actually going to be observing the content of our mind. And so as opposed to having, say, breath sensation be the anchor that we're using, this time what we're doing is we're just opening up the field of awareness. And I think John described it nicely. It's sort of like you're on the bank of a river and there are all kinds of things going by. There are yachts and dilapidated boats and, all kinds of things that would be floating by. And the idea is we're not like reeling any of that in. We're just allowing it to do its thing. And so we're really, again, getting some facility and comfort with the nature of the mind and how the mind works, that thoughts arise, they do their thing, and they move. And so it's helping us to also see the content of our mind, what we lean into, what we push away. And it's also helpful you could make like a mental note, for instance. It could be, if you're noticing you're in a pattern of, say, regret, it's actually fine to say regret and just let the body soften. But so you don't have a narrow focus, you actually have a wide focus. So we're going to start by settling in. We're going to open that focus. And then I'm actually going to close with connection practice or loving kindness that might be more familiar to you. And then I'll turn it back over to John. And we're here till 1:45. So for those of you that need to jump off at 1:30, of course, but we will hang out for Q&A. And so this will be probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 minutes or so of practice. Because I do want to leave time for us to converse about it, but also give you enough time to sample the practice. All right. So you want to assume a posture that feels like it's going to best serve you today, and that could be sitting or standing. Standing is a fine posture, especially if you feel any bit of sleepiness or if you feel tired. It's great to do standing practice. Otherwise, the eyes can be open or closed. And if you decide to keep the eyes open, just gaze downward a little bit. And as usual, I would ask you to take 2 deep breaths, make that exhalation longer than the inhalation, but do that on your own as a way to kind of arrive and settle any surface tension. And after the second exhalation, just notice your body holding yourself upright and in such a way that you're engaged, that the spine is straight but not stiff. And see if you can soften the shoulders and surrender your weight into the support of the surface, knowing that you're held by the earth below. So micro movements in the body for comfort, ease, and engagement. So upright, engaged, and softening the body to the degree that you can. And just notice any physical sensations in the body from your activity so far today. You might be aware of points of contact with the back of the body and the surface, or a pulsing or a vibration or tingling or temperature. So just notice, what is your body offering you at the level of sensation. The receptive attitude, so just receiving sensation. And let's receive sound now as well. So sound in the room or outside of the room. And engaging hearing. So without labeling what's making the sound, but just simply noting hearing. And coming back to the body, and just for a moment, tracking the breath. Wherever in the body the breath is most pronounced for you. So that could be rise and fall of kind of the belly or the chest area, or air going in and out of the nostrils. Or perhaps there's something else that is helpful for you as an anchor. That could be sound or another body sensation. We'll just do this for about a minute. And now releasing breath sensation or other body sensation. And begin to open the field of awareness to include thought and emotions, body sensations, sound. And the mind will go off into memory or storying or, a narrative, the way it usually does with all the other practices, the flashlight practice. And so it'll do that with this too. And as soon as you see that you've been engaging a story, you can just label thinking to keep it simple, release, and then return to that kind of open, spacious, receptive awareness. Just noticing the contents of the mind. That's what we're doing, noticing the contents of the mind flowing on by. Not hooking into any one thing, just receiving, allowing, and letting it float by. Watching the content of the mind. Open, spacious, receptive awareness to the flow of thought, emotion, body sensation. Relaxed and receptive. And I'm going to begin to close this practice with connection or loving kindness practice. And so you can silently repeat these phrases. May I be peaceful and at ease. May my heart be soft and open. May I be safe and protected. And my body healthy and strong. May all beings be peaceful and at ease. May their heart be soft and open. May they be safe and protected. Their bodies healthy and strong. And may the merit of our practice be for the benefit of all beings everywhere. So I'll count backward from 3, 2, and 1. And when you feel ready, if your eyes were closed, you can take a minute to open. And it's helpful always, especially if your eyes were closed, but even if they were gazed down, to just reorient to your surroundings. So I always suggest just kind of looking around a little bit and maybe stretching. And yeah, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Tara, for that. That was River of Thought, but also it was a little stinger of connection practice. Thank you for adding that in, Tara.
Yep.
I like this especially because I think it really sort of links up nicely with the River of Thought practice. I think these two things go together really well, especially as much as research has shown that the connection practice can help us sort of untether or unhook ourselves from these mental models, which might cause us to regard other people in negative ways. So in that sense, the connection practice is extremely valuable for preparing us to communicate and collaborate effectively with others. And in terms of what we're doing here, I'd also like to emphasize something else about the connection practice. This practice can also help us treat ourselves more kindly. Tara, you gestured to this already. It's not to say that doing the connection practice is ever going to let us off the hook if we do something wrong, because I think it's okay to feel reasonably bad when we've treated somebody else badly. But a lot of us have trained ourselves to treat ourselves too harshly. We may have built up a mental model of ourselves as someone who is not worthy of happiness or health or success or fulfillment. And so mindfulness practices, like all of these practices, which we've been studying and which Tara has been leading in this series, all these practices can help us fight back against those sorts of feelings of like self-criticism or self-judgment. But like learning a new skill, mindfulness practice is not always easy to do, especially not at first. And so the connection practice that we just did a little bit of has this bonus effect, I think, of training us to go a little easier on ourselves as we are embarking on this long and sometimes difficult, but ultimately fruitful journey, this mindful journey of becoming who we want to be in each of the moments of our lives.
One of the things I want to just add about the loving kindness practice is that, and this is something that many of the teachers along the way have shared, and I think it bears repeating, especially Sharon Salzberg, who's done quite a lot of this practice, is that you don't actually have to feel these tender feelings toward yourself or others. You just have to have the intention to want to feel them. That's it. And it's, I love that this is called a practice, because whatever we incline the mind toward, that's what we train. And so if we are making a decision to incline toward kindness and receptivity and forgiveness and generosity, which is what we do in these practices, that's what we train. We're, even if we're not there yet. I have a family member who often, John, when you showed the slide around, are you expecting contention? That's often what I expect. And when I can be really present and know that, oh, there I go with that expectation, when it's unseen, then the conversation usually devolves. But when I can see it, I have a much more productive interaction. And so mindfulness just helps us see that kind of stuff much more frequently, and to really see intention and motivation with more clarity.
So Tara, somebody in the chat box has asked, the person says they use the River of Thought practice often, and they can notice the thoughts and label them and try let them float away, but they find they often get stuck in a negative past experience or worrying about a future stressful situation. I was wondering if you have any advice on, when you do, like, it's almost as though it sounds like maybe something in the River of Thought has come up on the shore and they can't get it loose, and what to do in that sort of situation.
Yeah. I really appreciate that question, because you're not alone in that question. That's that's pretty common. It's like when you open up, like John said, you've sort of unleashed this torrent. So there's a couple things that I would suggest trying. One is that as you see you're entering that narrative of worry or to-do list or whatever that might be, as soon as you see it, make that label, and then come into the body. See if you can feel what that expression is like in the body, because you can't feel the physical sensations and be thinking of the thought fully. It's too hard to do both. So really coming out and putting your attention on your body, like feeling what the physical expression is of that. The other thing too is you can just, if you're finding that it's sort of relentless, is just to come out of that practice completely. And I often suggest, depending on how intense it is, to go into more of a movement practice. So that could be a walking meditation, it could be Tai Chi or yoga, but doing movement practices. So it's like you have to play around with it a little bit and see, but that, that would be, yeah.
Tara, you were mentioning something that Amishi Jha spoke to when she was with us last week, which I find fascinating. So her research studies attention, the neuroscience of attention, how mindfulness can impact that positively. And what she said was that the brain literally cannot attend to two things at once.
Right.
And so, as you were saying, if you
Right.
move your attention from, say, a worrisome thought to a feeling in the body, it actually does
Yes.
unhook you from the thought, because the attention can only go in one place.
That's
so at
right.
times that can be troublesome. It's like, I want to be paying attention to you, but instead my attention is like here.
Yes.
But other times when the attention is here, I can move it back, and then it's right where it needs to be. So
right, exactly. And all these practices, you're really gaining more facility with how to aim and sustain your own attention. And so that you're using it when you need to. So when you're in an interaction with somebody, that you're actually able to be really fully present with them. And, I know Amishi, she actually gives an example of talking to a congressman about these practices. And in the book, noting how his attention and awareness and mindfulness on what she was saying was so keen. So we know when people are with us, and we know when they're drifting. And it matters, it helps us when someone's attending.
I think that people can have a powerful effect on other people when they do develop that. I'll tell you a story, Tara. I don't know if you may not remember this, but I was with you the first time I ever met in passing John Kabat-Zinn. It was at a conference,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, right? He was, he's not a very, grand figure, right?
Right.
But he was like pulling people. I mean, people were just like gravitating towards him. I was watching him as he was communicating with each of these people, some of whom he knew, some of whom he didn't. And when he was with them, he was 100% with them. And when he just said I guess introduce myself, it was as though I was the only thing in his field of vision, even though I was just some nobody. And there were many more, influential people around him. But it was just that way of being able to attend fully in each moment.
I love that you felt that. Yeah. Laser
it felt powerful.
focus.
It felt like I really mattered to him.
Yes. And you did. Yes.
So Tara, if you don't mind, I think we have a few minutes. I'd love not that we gave the connection practice short shrift, but I'm wondering if you would mind just talking a bit about the types of ways we direct attention in that. I mean, so we usually, traditionally you start off by focusing on yourself and then moving outward. I'm wondering if you can just describe that process.
I'm happy to. And by the way, all these practices are helping to stabilize concentration and steady and stabilize the mind, all of them. So repeating the phrases, over and over again, that is helping to stabilize. So as John just said, typically we start with ourselves. Sometimes, and you show a slide to John of self-judgment, it can be hard to be with ourselves. So if that's the case, you might offer loving kindness. You might start with someone who's really easy for you, and that could even be a pet or another person. But typically we start with ourselves, and then we go to somebody that's really easy for us to feel goodwill toward. It could be someone who's helped us in our lives, or, somebody that we just have good feelings toward. We then go to a neutral person. So this could be somebody that you see when you're out shopping, but you may have had very little interaction with, but you tend to see them on somewhat of a regular basis. And so that's why they're called a neutral person. You don't really have any kind of strong feelings one way or the other, and offer them loving kindness. And And in a way, these practices just help us see our shared humanity, that we all want similar things. And then the last one is somebody who's difficult for you. So picking a person who, and typically it's good to start with somebody who's a little bit difficult, not like a lot difficult, but someone who's just a little bit difficult, and you can make your phrases up. Like the phrases I use, I have been using those for years. They're phrases that I came up with, that have worked for me over the years. I end every meditation daily with those phrases. So you could, make up your own. So just, mine, it's, may I be peaceful and at ease. May my heart be soft and open. May I be safe and protected. May my body be healthy and strong. So some version of that.
Tara, I kind of want to ask you the billion-dollar question about this, which is, you said it's sometimes it's good to at least not start with a difficult person who is very difficult, but sometimes it can feel almost unethical to be wishing loving kindness towards, let's say a leader or a politician, maybe who you disagree with so strongly that you feel like they are doing harm. I mean, is it even possible to sort of send loving kindness to them? And if you are doing that, is it disingenuous in a way?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the actions people take often come from places of deep suffering, often unexamined suffering. So I think it just depends on how you feel. It doesn't feel in any way unethical. It feels like it's leading toward the good. But of course, we have no control over any of it.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you for joining. We will hopefully see you again soon.
Yes.
You have a wonderful day.